So finally ready to start trucking. Heading on up to old Somerset now. Alright, so it was pretty much a wasted day. I did drop the floor pan back, and then the plan was to go and move a load of scrap cars, and then I would have one of them for myself to bring back, and so I could get rid of all that rubbish. But none of the scrap cars had wheels on, and they needed to be lifted over a fence with an old digger that hadn't run for like probably about 5 years. Yeah, I mean, it just wasn't gonna happen. So back at the workshop now, still got a massive pile of in the corner, which I need to get rid of. So if anyone in the Dorset area has got a scrap car they need shifting, then give me a shout, I'll come and get it. So I thought I'd just show you around the workshop a little bit. I always get people asking about these cars in the background, that Ford Pop and the Mark II Escort. So yeah, give you a little look at the workshop, or the cow shed, which is what this is. Alright, so this is a Ford Pop. They made them like 1950 to 1959, I think. Something around there. I don't know exactly what year this one is. This is a customer's car. And initially it started off, just wanted a chassis building, and then it's just sort of escalated from there to what it is now, which is a completely built car. I've built the chassis, made all the suspension, every panel on it pretty much. The only bit that's original is like from here up and over. All this is new, all this is new. All like from here down is all new, all inside here is new. I had to remake this whole lip all around this edge. This is a roof skin off of a Mini, which actually fits unbelievably well on one of these. So that's a Saab B204 engine. So I've made all the suspension, and all the geometry is basically from a Locust kit car, just narrowed down. It's sort of the parts that they would use for building those cars, a Mark II Escort rack with hubs from a Sierra, and then I just obviously made all the arms for it. You can see how well that roof skin fits to one of these. And then that little valley will be filled with lead. And then every single panel in here had to be made. Those little flat bits there that connect into the chassis at the back, that's where the rear legs of the cage will sit, because this is having a half roll cage in it, which is going to come down to here. Everything's going a bit rusty. I've got a load of welding to finish off underneath here, and then take it to the blasters and get it all blasted. But we've got two parallels at the bottom, and then two diagonals at the top, because this is going to run bigger tires on the back, so that's why there's so much drop to the back of the axle from the chassis. But if he wants to just stick a bigger tire on to go drag racing or something, he can just drop the shock point down here, and it will raise the back axle up without losing any travel from the shock. This is all just loose, that's why that's hanging at a funny angle like that. But yeah, if you do all your adjustments on here to the point where you're dropped right down to get this wheel further up to run a bigger tire, you're basically losing travel on your shock. So by having mounts that you can go up or down, you can run a bigger tire without losing too much travel on your shock. So, and then this is the boot. The fuel tank is going to sit in here. It's going to have like a round spun fuel tank up in there, and then probably all the pumps and everything sat on this bit down below. So I'm going to be getting back on this thing after Christmas now. I've sort of been doing a bit, you know, when he when he wants to spend money on it. This project's been going on for probably over a year and a half. So I've got the cage made up over there. It's just a half cage going in the back. So yeah, that's that one. Now this one over here. Right, so this car, I've been trying to get this thing built for probably about 4 years now. I've owned like probably 7 or 8 maybe Mark II Escorts or Mark 1 and Mark II Escorts. I've had loads of projects which are, I've just bought and sold. I've worked on loads of them. But I had one which I'd had for like years, and I'd done loads with it, and it had been a road car, and it turned into a track car. I did loads of events in it. And before I built my hot rod, I sold it so that I could basically build the hot rod. And I just really regretted it, and been trying to recreate the same car since then pretty much, and this is it. So I get a bit of enthusiasm for it every now and then, and do a bit, and then it just sits and never really gets done. But so Saab turbo engine, intercooler's all done, MX5 radiator. I'm going to remake that inlet manifold. Got to make a turbo manifold for it. Got to make a full exhaust system for it. And then wire it up, and it would be a usable car. It needs some bodywork. Still got a bit of rust doing it. I basically started from the front doing the repairing the rust, and got to about here. So from the wheel arch back, there's still some holes in the back, but from everything forward of that is completely done. All the suspension's done. It's got these are Tarmac Bilstein coilovers, Tarmac spec. Billet short steering arms from CS Engineering, my buddy Ed Cobb. It's got a quick rack, which I've also modified to get an extra bit of lock out of it. And then at the back, it's still on leaf springs, but I've set up loads of these cars, and I basically do like an A-frame type axle location setup, weld the lowering blocks on, modify the spring hangers so that they can't twist at the bottom, because they always twist and the bolts come loose and you just end up with a load of slop. And then the casing's split where the tubes join to the main section of the casing, so I basically reinforced from the centre out. It's all polybush front to back, and yeah, single leafs. It's got a limited slip diff in the back with I think it's a 4:1 ratio, and then I box in these just in front of the spring hangers, and then the A-frame bars. The A-frame bars are basically coming off of those boxes, and they go out to the centre of the diff. And then I also put it's like a jacking point with a drain bung in the middle of it, so you can just makes it easier when you want to change the diff or whatever. You can drain the oil out, and yeah, this thing will handle amazing with leaf springs on it. It's it's leaf sprung Dirk technique, or it's leaf sprung Urch technique. This is an MSA spec roll cage. It's nice and tight. It's basically welded straight to the body around the roof line. So no need for any gussets down the. It's all welded into the dash panel. Bias pedal box. Made a little switch panel for the. Got a little custom gauge panel for the gauges, and then this is an Amiga gearbox, which I've converted the thingamajig to a short shift in there, so it's nice short shift on it. And then full custom firewall in the back, so the back is completely sealed off. I've plugged every little hole in the firewall welded up all the holes in the pillars there. So that's basically what you have to do on the rally cars. And then so that your fuel tank's completely sealed off from the driver's compartment. And the cage ties into the rear shock mounts there at the back rather than tying into the wheel tub, which is normally what's done on a leaf sprung car. If you've got a turreted car, you'd go straight to the turrets at the back, but most of the leaf sprung cars end up on the wheel tub, which I don't think is a great idea. This way, that's completely braced with this beam all the way across the top of the two chassis legs, so it's a much better way of doing it. Got my little battery mounted, folded up that little box a few weeks ago. Actually, that was the last job I did on this. I say a few weeks ago, that's probably more like a few years ago. And then my buddy who bought my old hot rod has now become a Saab expert basically, and he makes all the looms, does all the tuning for the Saab engines. So he made me this little loom adapter, so it'll just plug in and away we go. These are the wheels. I'm a fan of the old Mini lights, so I will get that finished before I die. The workshop is basically just an old cow shed, really high roof, impossible to heat in the winter, but it is quite cool in the summer. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say about the workshop. I put this beam in. This was basically sectioned off here and they had some like rooms in the back. So I took this wall out, put that RSJ in so that I could get cars back in there. And then this room, I plan to insulate all of this, board it all, insulate the roof so that I've got one room that I can have a heater in and then just keep coming back in here to warm up in the winter, because yeah, there's no way of heating this place. So I need to board all that out. I need to paint everything because it's all pretty mouldy and minging, but this, when I moved in like a year ago, this whole wall was soaked. It's dried out now because the gutter was leaking at the top, which I fixed. And then I got like an upstairs little, well, quite a big space actually, which I definitely want to try and do something with this. So I'd like to maybe build this up to the roof here with a wall, put some windows in it, and then maybe stud wall everything off so that I can make this to like a nice sort of clean place to store stuff or whatever. Yeah, the floor, probably the worst thing about this workshop is the floor, because it's an old cow shed. It's like super rough and you can't sweep it without getting a huge cloud of dust everywhere, and all the dust sits in all those grooves. So it's a pretty dirty workshop and you just can't seem to actually get rid of the dust. It's almost like it's coming out of the floor. So I got a mate whose dad does floor screeding. He's going to give me a price to like plane the floor flat, but he hasn't seen it, so I'm not sure that he'd actually be able to do it, but we'll see. I swapped all these lights out for LED strip lights to save a bit of money on the electricity bill. They are really expensive and they're absolute dog shit. Like they look bright on this camera. To try and light this space, they're crap. I got one normal one here that gives off more light than these. He's always about, never does any work. What else? Yeah, not really much else to show. Apart from my prehistoric compressor, which was manufactured 300 million years ago. So yeah, this is the cow shed. I moved in here about a year ago, and I a workshop where I had everything you could ever need when it comes to wanting to build a car. It was like 4 or 5 workshops all in one big building, and on one side I had a mate who was a CAD designer who had pretty much full engineering workshop, which I had access to. It was like if someone needed to use my welding kit, they could use it. If I needed to use a lathe, he'd let me use his lathe. And then on the other side, I had a mate who owned the whole place, he was real into restoring cars, and he used to run a farm machinery business from it. So he had like all the metal shaping stuff, rollers, folders, stretchers, all that stuff. And then he had like every tool you could ever need for any job. Like if you had a bearing stuck on something, he would be like, oh, I've got a puller to pull that off. Or if you needed some little pin or clip that you'd lost, he'd like have a whole box of them. He just had like everything you would ever need. So within those workshops, there was nothing that couldn't be done within that space. It was ideal for what I do. It couldn't have been better, and you know, I was paying less than half the rent of what I'm paying here to be there, and it was just, I just, you know, loved being there. It was a cool spot out the way. But we moved house about 2 years ago, and I was traveling 45 miles each way to work and back, and it was just too much. So this place is 2 miles from my house, so I can go home for lunch, and the money that I save on fuel pays the extra what this place costs. But it was definitely like a step backwards to move in here with the limited amount of tools that I've got. I am a bit restricted as to what I can take on now in terms of work, but I've got everything I need. You know, I can build a roll cage, do basic stuff, but I'd need to buy a massive amount of equipment to be in the position that I was at the old unit. But you know, I can do my job from here, and it is what it is. It ain't what it ain't. So yeah, that's the tour of the Urchfab cowshed headquarters. Yeah, back on the mongrel next week. Keep your eyes peeled for that, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.